What's going on, growers? It's James Bigioni coming to you live from Jersey. You're probably starving your garden and you might not even know it. Today, I'm going to share with you the major change which took my garden from mediocre to over the top abundant. Let's go! I began gardening almost 15 years ago, and when I first started, I wanted to do it all completely natural. I was into a style of gardening known as natural farming, where you use no sprays, there's no fertilizers, and there's no tilling. It's essentially just planting seeds. I did that the first year and I had a lot of fun with it, and the garden grew relatively well. I think one of the reasons it grew pretty well is because I've got some sandy soil, but it still has some nutrition in it. My garden now looks a lot different and the production is unbelievably higher than what it used to be. I made a few major changes which made all the difference for me and paid off big time. After gardening in the natural farming style for a year or so, I decided I wanted to be more hands-on with the garden. I wanted to do something besides just planting the seeds. So what I did was I began making my own compost pile with things like leaves, some of the chicken manure from the chickens that I had. I miss those chickens, I had some absolutely beautiful ones. Some coffee grounds, some wood ash, and would mix all organic materials together to form a hot compost pile. The next year, I incorporated this compost into my garden and put it around my annuals. Adding the compost resulted in plants that were much healthier and the production was a lot higher. And it really got me thinking. Originally, my approach was to just look out at nature and see how all the native plants were growing beautifully. The trees were massive and healthy, green leaves. No one was going out there and taking care of them. No one was adding fertilizer. They were just supporting themselves by the falling of their own leaves and the nutrition that's just naturally in the soil. So I thought I could do the same thing in my garden. What I failed to realize those first couple of years was I'm not growing native plants in my garden. I want to grow domesticated annuals that need a lot more nutrition than something that just grows natively. At this point, I was all about compost. I would say I need to make as much compost as I possibly can. I even got into vermicompost at this point, where we use worms to make some compost, and that was a blast to do. By the next year, I had essentially become obsessed with gardening, so I decided to expand my garden, and it brought me to another realization. There's no way I'm going to be able to make enough compost to support my expanding garden. The amount of time, the amount of space, the amount of effort, and the amount of organic matter that I would need to support my whole garden didn't seem completely plausible. I also began getting into container gardening at this time because I wanted to see how I could get even more space in a small backyard, and growing containers seemed like the best way to do it. So I figured maybe I should learn how to make my own soil. I dove into making my own soil, did some research, and found that I needed to start with a compost. I decided to use a mushroom compost that I can get locally, and it's still the same mushroom compost that I use today for my soils. But within my research, I learned that mushroom compost is used to grow mushrooms. Because of that, the nutrition within it can be a bit depleted. So it said you should add some all-purpose organic fertilizer when using the mushroom compost in your containers, and that's what I did. My plants grown in containers with homemade soil and organic fertilizer grew prolifically and outpaced anything I had growing in the garden. So I decided to bring that same style to my raised beds, and everything changed. You might be thinking, James, obviously adding some fertilizer is going to help. Well, I was new at the time, and my thinking was that nature does it better. And to a degree it does, but at a way different time schedule than what works for me. For most of my perennials and my trees, like you can see one right here, a gold cherry in full bloom, absolutely beautiful. I don't really feed these. What I do is I put a thick mulch down under my trees, then the fungi come in and the worms come in, they break that organic matter down into a form of nutrition that's bioavailable for the plants. The thing is, when it comes to wood chips and leaves, they take a long time to break down and to be able to feed our plants. So I needed something that I could use in my raised beds that I can put in in the beginning of the season that would feed my annuals. Now, I am a major proponent to using organic fertilizers in the backyard garden. I don't want people to waste the same amount of time that I did coming to the realization that compost is good, but adding some fertilizer will make a massive difference. I still love making compost. I do it all the time, and I add it into my beds, but I incorporate it into the soil to add some organic matter. I don't use compost as my only sole form of nutrition for my plants. I like to use some fertilizer. I want to get into the kinds of fertilizer I use, how I use them, and why organic fertilizer is a way better option than synthetic. Synthetic fertilizers and organic ones are completely different and work in different ways. Synthetic fertilizers are man-made or highly processed. They contain the major nutrients in readily soluble form because they can dissolve in water. This means the plants can take up the nutrition pretty quick because they are dissolved in water. When you're using synthetic fertilizers, you are directly feeding your plants, which can be a good thing, but it could also be a bad thing, because if you over-fertilize, you could burn your plants, as they say, when you just over-fertilize too much because it's too concentrated, and that could be negative for your plants. Another thing is you could actually burn the roots of your plants by over-fertilizing with a synthetic fertilizer because it can cause a salt buildup. Another thing is you're not going to be adding any organic matter when you're using a synthetic fertilizer. So not only does it not help improve soil structure, it actually leads to poorer soil structure over time. And another unfortunate thing about using a synthetic fertilizer is that if you over-fertilize, then some of that fertilizer might not be used and it can leach out of the soil and actually cause pollution. As opposed to using an organic fertilizer, which comes from natural plant, animal, or mineral sources like compost, manure, bone meal, blood meal, fish emulsion, rock dusts, these actually don't feed our plants. Instead, they feed the soil microorganisms within our soil, and then those actually break down the materials and release the nutrition into the soil so our plants can readily take them up. This is a way more natural form of feeding plants. An organic fertilizer will improve soil structure and fertility as they decompose. We're feeding the microorganisms. That helps build soil structure. If you have sandy soil, that means that it could help retain more moisture. On the other hand, if you have clay soil, adding the organic matter and the natural fertilizer, that will actually help with drainage. So no matter what kind of soil you have, organic fertilizer will help. Another cool thing is that this nutrition in an organic fertilizer is released over time and gradually. This is known as slow release feeding. This is a lot better in my opinion because when you feed like this, you don't have a chance of burning your plants and you don't have a chance of extra fertilizer being leached out of the soil. Organic fertilizers are the only ones that I would use in my garden. They provide our plants with the necessary nutrition to thrive while also increasing the quality of our soil over time. Now, let's get into some information about the nutrients our plants need and how they affect growth. When you grab a bag of fertilizer, you'll always notice these three numbers right here. These are called the NPK, and these are the major nutrients our plants need, known as the macronutrients. When it comes to NPK, us gardeners often remember it as up, down, and all around. So when it comes to the nitrogen, that is what's going to affect the plant's growth in regards to the green growth and the height. That's what we call the up. It's the overall size of the plant. That's what the nitrogen is going to do. The phosphorus is the down. That is going to affect a lot of your root growth, your flowers, and your fruit. And the other one is the potassium, known as all around. This will help the all around overall growth of the whole plant. It will help strengthen the stem, help with disease resistance, and also the development of fruit. So with this simple saying, it can give you a good idea of what each of those macronutrients do: the up, the down, and the all around. Now that we know what the macronutrients are and how they affect growth, we could choose a fertilizer. After I show you just a few things. I will show you how I use my fertilizer in my garden, and I think it's the most effective way to do it. But first, let's get into this. So this, what I like to use, is an all-purpose fertilizer. It's called balanced. All the numbers are balanced, like you see here. They're all in the same ratios. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are in the same ratios within this fertilizer. As opposed to something like this. This one is designed for tomatoes. So you'll notice it has some nitrogen, but it has a higher level of phosphorus. That helps with, like we talked about, fruiting and roots. So this will help with fruit development. There's also other fertilizers, like something I love to use is the blood meal. I'll use that around some of my leafy greens. That's a 12-0-0, so that's like pure nitrogen. If you're wanting to fertilize something like your grass, it's going to be another one that's high in nitrogen. So when it comes to the front numbers, they're really just ratios of the nitrogen, the phosphorus, and the potassium. Let me show you how I use fertilizer in my garden and how I'm able to get the consistent results that I do. So it all starts really with making my own soil. And I love making my own soil. I use a very basic recipe consisting of mushroom compost, cocoa coir, perlite, and vermiculite. Mixing these together allows me to get an incredible soil with really good structure that not only drains well, but also retains moisture. Then what I like to do is add my all-purpose fertilizer before planting. You really want to add the all-purpose fertilizer before planting because, like we talked about earlier, it's not immediately bioavailable for the plants. It needs to be broken down and it releases slowly, which is a good thing though, because as it releases, then that will continually be able to feed our plants as the season goes on. So for a bed like this, I add my soil, then take my JP Secret stuff. It's my favorite stuff. I mean, I put my name on it. Then I sprinkle it over the top of the bed and mix it into the top few inches. I do this with all of my beds, and I think it's a really good idea because what it does is it sets every bed up the same and perfect, and all I need to do is then just take my plants and transplant them into the ground. But if there's some plants that I want to switch up some amendments, it's really easy to do. I already know that these things are fertilized because I have my all-purpose fertilizer, nice and balanced. But if I want to plant something like, let's say, lettuce in the ground, I want to transplant that in, I'll take some blood meal and then I'll sprinkle that around my lettuces after I transplanted them in and then water the blood meal in. This way that extra nutrition can boost my lettuce to grow a lot quicker and to be more productive, and it's just a fantastic way to do it in my opinion. When it comes to the tomatoes, I do something just a little different. So when I plant my tomatoes, I take my all-purpose fertilizer, I mix that into the soil, then I'll dig my hole and then take something like a bone meal, and then I'll add some bone meal into the bottom of my hole and mix that in. This will help add some phosphorus, again, for the roots and the fruits. Then I'll also go by and add in some mycorrhizal inoculant. This is an important one because what it does is it helps the plant's roots develop the mycorrhizal association. This helps with transplant shock. It also helps with the plants take up nutrients and water. There are also some liquid organic fertilizers that you can use where the nutrition in them will be more quickly available for your plants. Like fish emulsion, this is a great one. The only thing it's a 5-1-1. So it has 5 times more nitrogen. This is a really good option for some things like your greens or even something like a brassica plant like you see here. At this stage, about 3 or 4 weeks after it's been growing, you could come by, use some fish emulsion, and that will really help with the growth. The thing is, I don't know if you've ever used this stuff, but it absolutely stinks. So I don't particularly like using it that much. And I just like to fertilize before I plant out. That's a better way, in my opinion. Another thing is, if you're going to be using something like this or anything that's high in nitrogen to fertilize your plants, you want to make sure that you're not using it too much on plants that you're growing for the root or the fruit. For example, say you're growing tomatoes and the tomatoes are just kind of getting to the stage of starting to flower, or maybe right before that. If you go by and give them a bunch of this or something that has a high level of nitrogen, then the plants are going to focus on the way that nitrogen affects their growth. Like we talked about earlier, a lot of nitrogen means a lot of leaf growth and a lot of like overall size. So if you try to give nitrogen to your plants when they're heading into their fruiting stage, that's going to make them all confused. They're going to focus mainly on leaf growth instead of fruit production. The same thing goes for some plants that are light feeders. Things like peas and beans, they fix their own nitrogen from the atmosphere, put it around their roots and nodules, and then kind of give themselves nitrogen. If you go by and give them an extra boost of nitrogen, they're mainly just going to focus on leaves. So when it comes down to it, make sure you're using a fertilizer that isn't going to confuse your plants. After you add fertilizer to your bed and plant your stuff out, the feeding isn't done yet. Because as the season goes on and your plants grow, they will use a lot of the nutrition in the soil. Remember, these are domesticated vegetables and they are heavy feeders. So we want to make sure we stay on top of feeding them. To do that, I suggest you go around mid-season or so and give them a top dressing. When it comes to plants like my tomatoes, right before they start to head into production, or my brassicas, once they get really large and before they start forming heads or anything, I'll go by and top dress with my all-purpose fertilizer. This is important to do. I'll apply the fertilizer on the top, mix it into the soil, and then water that fertilizer in. You want to make sure that you go out and top dress your plants before they're showing signs of lack of nutrition or before they're looking weak and stuff. Because like we talked about earlier, this kind of fertilizer takes a little time to slowly release into the soil. So you want to make sure you're going out and fertilizing your plants before they actually need the fertilizer. If you do this, your plants will consistently grow healthy and strong all season long, and they will be vibrant and strong heading into production. There are other fertilizers you can use and other ways of fertilizing, like foliar sprays, where you directly spray your plants with something like a compost tea. This could be used as like in addition to a regular fertilizer, but it's not going to provide enough fertilizer for your plants to fully sustain them. It's a great option as a quick fix to help with like a nutrient deficiency, because when you foliar feed, they can take that nutrition in quicker, but overall it's not going to be enough to sustain healthy plants. Another thing is, they say spraying like compost tea on your plants could help with some bacteria or some fungal issues. The only thing is, when it comes to plants like tomatoes, I try everything I can to make sure that those leaves don't get wet and stay wet, because that's what brings in fungal issues. So when it comes down to it, I'm not a huge fan of using compost tea or foliar sprays on some of my plants, although for some plants like the brassicas, it is a good option. A common mistake I often see, especially new gardeners make, is blaming plant issues on a fertilizer issue, when really it's more of like a soil or a water issue. In just a minute, I'm going to go into some of the common signs you'll see with nutrient deficiencies, but I'll also talk about how a lot of times people think they're nutrient deficiencies when really it's water, and blossom end rot is one of them. People often think it's a lack of calcium, but really it's usually due to uneven watering. The first deficiency we'll get into is nitrogen. Notice the color on these leaves. Nice, dark green, glossy, looks super healthy on the celery. Then let me show you a celery up here that has a nitrogen deficiency. Look at the difference in color. Look how much more pale these leaves are. And in a nitrogen deficiency, the older leaves will become more pale. So these are actually older leaves. These are two different plants here. This is an old leaf here. And notice this is one of the older leaves on this plant. So when you see a nitrogen deficiency, it will often show up as pale leaves. And sometimes the whole plant can get a little more pale, which you'll notice here. To help with that and to fix the issue, all we need to do is add some extra nitrogen. If we want to really boost it, we can do something like blood meal. This is going to be a really strong one. But if we want a quick fix, we can use something like the fish emulsion. This is going to help feed our plant quicker, because it's going to be more bioavailable for the plant much sooner. So that will help with nitrogen. You could also just use something like an all-purpose fertilizer. That's what I would probably do in this situation. Just put some all-purpose fertilizer around it, let it do its thing. But if you want to fix a little quicker, a fish emulsion would be a good option. The next deficiency is going to be a phosphorus one, which this plant has. The side effects of that will be stunted growth, as you notice, and then also a bluish, even purplish hue to the leaves, which is very obvious right here. This plant was stunted and has some nutrient deficiency because I left it in the pot too long before actually transplanting it into the garden, and I should have added some feed to it. I know this thing will pop right back though now that it's in the ground and I've already fertilized this soil. But if I wanted to help this plant just a little bit more, what I could or should do is I can add some extra phosphorus. To do that, I could take some bone meal and just put it around the plants and then mix it into the top few inches of the soil, then water that in. But if I want something that's gonna get the effect a little quicker, I could add something like a liquid bloom, which is going to be high in phosphorus and it's going to be quickly bioavailable for the plants. When it comes down to it though, for something like this, I'm just gonna leave it as is. I know that it will pop back once it kind of sets its new roots into the ground and really starts growing. I mean, look at all the other plants in here, like this, beautiful, and I think everything's gonna come around once it gets just a little more time in the soil. Next up, we have potassium deficiencies. This plant has one. They will usually show up in some of your leaves. You'll see here, the outer, older leaves will start to even get a little crispy in extreme cases like this, but the inner part of the leaf is okay. You also will see some yellowing on the outer end of the leaves. Another common sign of plants that lack potassium is the plants will be not very vigorous and not very sturdy, because potassium is really important for making your plants drought tolerant and just making them stronger overall. If you think some of your plants might have potassium deficiencies, there's a few things you could add. One of them would be something like a kelp meal. Would be a good option. You could add that. When it comes down to it though, again, I usually just go with the all-purpose fertilizer, because I know if I'm using an all-purpose fertilizer, then all my nutrition should be added into the soil essentially already. Another common one is calcium. People often think their plants have calcium deficiencies when they really don't. The hands down most common one has to do with blossom end rot. So when tomatoes and peppers, they'll form the fruit at the bottom, there'll be like a sunken thing at the bottom. This is known as blossom end rot, and people often think that their plants don't have enough calcium, and guess what? They'd be right. Their plants don't have enough calcium, but oftentimes it's not because there's not enough calcium in the soil. Calcium is immobile in plants. It needs water to actually carry through the plant. So if you have improper watering or uneven watering and your plants don't have enough water, then they're not going to be able to take that calcium and move it up through the plant and actually spread it through the plant so that it can uptake that calcium. Oftentimes, like I mentioned earlier, new gardeners think that so many of these issues they have with plants are related to nutrition, when really they're related to water and soil. That is why within this video about fertilizer, I talked a lot about making my own soil, about soil structure, because if we have good soil with good soil structure and we have healthy plants and then we give them an all-purpose fertilizer, there should be no issues as long as we protect them. So by doing all these things and combining everything together, this is how you consistently grow healthy plants year after year. When it comes down to it, in nature, everything's connected. So a more holistic approach always makes sense. Nowadays, this is how I grow my garden, and I would never grow back. This style of growing is a lot more enjoyable and a lot more fun because it feels more worth the time. You know you're gonna get consistent harvests. If there's some cool varieties that you've never done before, you could try them, because this style, it's almost like gardening on easy mode, and that's pretty cool as long as you protect your plants, because with everything going well, the bugs can still come and eat a lot of your stuff. You might be thinking, James, this is going to be a lot more expensive to start than just using everything natural. And I would say you're absolutely right. But if you plan on gardening for a long period of time and you stick with it, the first year to set up is going to be more expensive to maybe get your beds or something, build your soil, get your fertilizer. But then every year after that, it gets even cheaper and you're getting better and building better soil over time. So your harvests get larger, the work becomes less, and your overall investments become less while your harvests get bigger. So as long as you stick with it, it's actually cheaper in my opinion, because you get to save the one commodity that you can never get back, and that is time. That's today's video, growers. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. So bad today, I just wanted to run around and show you guys all the plants in here because everything is woken up. I showed you a lot of the beds. The trees are flowering, the bees are working, the sun is out. Spring is actually here, and it actually feels like it's here. And I feel like I've been waiting years for spring, and you probably feel like that too. So it's so nice that it's here. Let us know down in the comments how excited you guys are for spring, and if there's something you're trying out new this year, or maybe it was your first time using fertilizer, you've never used fertilizer, or maybe you're really excited about a tomato, let us know down in the comments because we love interacting with all you guys. I also want to mention that if you want to be part of a bigger community of growers where we all come together to help one another out, check us out over at teamgrow.us. We have the community there. We have over 1,000 members where we're all contributing. We're helping to add value to one another, and we're all just growing a better future as a result. I also want to mention to check out the shop at teamgrow.us if you want the best organic fertilizer, the one that I use and the one that I designed for the garden and put my name on it. Once I realized how important fertilizer could be for my garden, I was like, I gotta make my own. And this is what I came up with. We hope you guys get some value from it, but don't think that's the only fertilizer you have to use. There's plenty of good all-purpose organic fertilizers out there. So if you want to get another one, go ahead. Just make sure you add some fertilizer so that you can get big harvests. I almost don't want to end the video because it's such a nice day and I just wanted to keep on going, but we'll have to get out of here soon. Before I do that, I want to mention a thank you to one of our new channel members, Phil's Road. Thanks for being a part of Team Grow. Thanks for having your hand in everything we're doing out here. Spring is here, guys. Things can't get better. Don't forget to get outside, get your stuff planted so you can be getting big harvests in the future. We'll catch you again on another one real soon. We